All right, so we're continuing on with the Middle Ages. I have to say I'm really pleased with the responses that you all are giving me. I think it shows that you have some background knowledge about the Middle Ages, and it's quite interesting to see the things that you are learning, maybe that you thought or were misinformed about, that you're now learning the real facts. And then, of course, the connections from the past to this new era known as the Middle Ages. When we talk about Charlemagne, it was kind of 50-50. You know, I agree with those of you who said the sword was the most powerful, because without the sword, the Pope would have never come. The sword represented 30 years that Charlemagne fought to expand his empire to become the most powerful in Europe. And yet, the other half of you are making the connection that the church is this huge part of medieval life and how one lives, and the Pope being the head of that and giving the crown, that shows power as well. So really great connections there. I always like to talk about the Vikings because the Vikings are interesting people. One of the videos I was going to show that I rewatched, it was a little more boring, but a lot of people think of, the Vikings as big burly man with beards and horns and, just go and raid and are savages. And a lot of that is true, but you saw a different side of the Vikings. And yes, they raided the monasteries because the monasteries were full of monks who all they did was pray all day. And so they had a lot of wealth there. And they were easy targets. There's another reason, though, why, too, the Vikings and the monks didn't get along. And it, again, goes with religion. You see, before Christianity came into the picture, there was Judaism, a monotheistic belief system. But really, there wasn't any other monotheistic belief system. It was had all been polytheistic. Well, now that Europe is a Christian monotheistic belief system, and they're spreading this throughout Europe by means of the Roman roads and missionaries, those people who continue to be polytheistic are now the outsiders and known as pagans. So if you've heard that word before, pagans, that is definitely what the Vikings were in the monks' eyes. They were pagans. They were evil. They were not believing in the one God. And so, there wasn't a great relationship between the Vikings and the monks or the monasteries because of that thinking as well. But many of you got the reason why I put them together is because the one raided the other because they were easy targets. Okay? With the Vikings, we now are going to get what we're talking about today, which is the feudal system. And this is really the government style, the well-organized government style of the Middle Ages in Europe. It happens to also be the government style of the Japanese. We didn't get to the Japanese, and so really you would have had prior knowledge to the feudal system going into the Middle Ages. Now it's brand new, so now you need to watch this video so you understand about the feudal system. The feudal system came about because of the Vikings, because of these outsiders and invaders. You see, the kings were too weak to protect their land. And we've seen this before. And so the king needed help. This is also why you think of knights in shining armor, because they are part of the feudal system. I'm going to be referring to pages 641 through 645. Okay, so these are the pages that you are going to be wanting to definitely read on your own and to refer to for this assignment and understanding of the feudal system. But the part of the feudal system, or the start of the feudal system, is the fact that the kings couldn't protect their own land, and so they needed help. The feudal system is nicely diagrammed on page 642. So If you're going to watch this and then go back to the book, look at page 642. You will see what I am talking about. I didn't even show you. Why don't I just show you here? Okay. So here you go. You're going to see the king. You're going to see lords and vassals. You're going to see our knights, and you're going to see the peasants. This is that social structure. And the guy at the top is the king. But you see, the king has money, the king has land, but the king can't protect the land without the rest of these people. Here's another diagram. If I had my whiteboard, I'd be writing on it. So think of the king's kingdom as a circle. And what he does is he breaks his kingdom down into fiefs. And fiefs is just a word for estate or land. And so the king will give land to lords. And so if this lord is protecting this land, and this lord is protecting this land, and this lord is protecting this land, then the king's whole land is protected. And they all will prove or support or, what do I want to say? Give their loyalty to the king. Okay, and the king rewards them with land. Now, the Lord himself, okay, he can break his land up even more and give it to someone named a vassal. So now the Lord is in charge of this whole land, but he's got vassals underneath him to help protect his land as well. And the vassals could give land to other vassals. And so you've got this hierarchy of most powerful, the king, kind of, and then everyone giving land to each other underneath. And the person who protects the land for the vassals and the lords are the knights in shining armor, because they wore metal armor and metal shines. I don't know how they wore it. It doesn't look comfortable to me. It looks pretty heavy, but that's what they did. Okay? Now, a knight is a very special person. And it's on page 642. You'll see a whole section here it's called Knights and Warfare. But many of the knights came from noble families, and knights were warriors who were trained warriors on horseback. Okay? Around the magical age of 7, in the ancient world, and now in the medieval times, 7 is the time to start learning or teaching or training the boys in warfare. So at 7, the boy would be sent to the castle of his father's lord, and learned then how to fight. And he pledged, that's the word I was looking for, he pledged his loyalty to the Lord. These people would die for their lord. The lords would die for the king. So the king is the most powerful person, but yet he doesn't have the power. He needs these other people to help him out. The other thing about the knights is this code of chivalry, which again, when you think of knights, they always go into battle. They save the princess. They're like the most perfect of men or something. It's just, the thing is, that is because of a code in which they live by. It requires them to be brave, to be loyal, to be generous, to fight fairly in battle. And so they take this oath of that. So that's why you think of knights, if you think of knights in the Middle Ages, which a lot of you put. A lot of you put castles as well. Why? Because the castles is what the kings and the lords lived in. And, they started kind of modest, but then, one king puts another part to his castle. And then another one puts another column on the other side, and they start to grow and get big, and those are the castles you think of. So it was really just trying to one-up each other in the means of the castle. But on 643, you see what the center of life was like, And that is the medieval manor, which is what your assignment is going to be. Okay? So you want to read about the feudal system to understand this well-organized government, to understand again that the king is at the top. He has land, he has money, but he can't protect his whole kingdom. He has his lords that he gives the land to in return for their loyalty to him to the death to protect his land. Those lords can give land to vassals. All of that land is going to be under the protection of knights who give this oath of loyalty, of service to protect, and again, to the death, their lord, then their king. And then underneath that, you have the majority of people, the peasants. And then underneath the peasants are peasants who are bound to the land called serfs, which means that a serf had to stay on that land. Like if the Lord decides to break his land up, the serf doesn't get to say, oh, great, well, I can go move. No, the serf now becomes the property of whoever that land is given to. So it's basically like they're slaves. They're free, though, somehow. They're taken care of a bit, but they're not allowed to leave. They're like bound to the land. And so, yes, this is the majority of the population are peasants. And so they will work the land for their vassal, for the lord. They will then give the lord, kind of like the tenant farmers, except they're not paying for the land. But the lord gets so much and then they get some, and they can live on the land. They can take his timber to make houses and fires. They can have their own little plot of land for farming on their own. They can have some livestock. But in the end, they're still part of the land that the Lord owns. This is the feudal system. Make sure you read about it. When you get to page 644, you see a nice illustration of a typical manor, okay? You've got the castle in the background. You've got the peasants working the farmland. You've got the peasant houses there, which a lot of times were made out of like mud or manure and straw. They're very small. You've got the church, because again, that is going to be the center of their life. You've got a mill, which grounds up grain to make flour. It has the big wheel, so you need to be by water for a mill to work. If you go, which I don't know if it will open, to Waldemere and the mill run, that's why it's called that, because you're on a mill. Connection. And then you'll see you have wells, because that's where the fresh water is going to come from. Okay? I have given you an assignment. I'm going to give you today and tomorrow because I want the creativity to flow through. But you're going to make your own manor. Usually we do this on paper and you would get to print it out and you get to cut it up and you get to put it on paper. But we're going to try it on Google Docs, or a Google slideshow, I should say. And so I hope it works. I made one. What you are going to do when you get in is you're going to need to add a slide. Okay, so let's come over here again. And to add a slide, you just do the plus sign, okay? And you want to add a slide, and I would use the slide down here that is going to be blank. Okay, and a slide is added for you. Now, the first slide you're going to see has the information of what you need. You need to put your name. To put your name, you need to come up here to the text box, make a text box, add your name. And then this is everything else you need. You're going to name your manor, which again, you can add a text box so that you can name your manor. You're going to select a castle that you want to live in. You're going to need to find pictures of peasants and put them working on your manor. you're going to want to find some peasant houses. You're going to need your fields or the crops that your land is going to be providing. You want some livestock there. You obviously want the mill. Of course, you can't forget the church. And I forgot one, guys. You need some wells because you need water. Okay? So this is everything that you need. You'll always be able to come back to this slide to see if you have everything. So this, you'll see, is my manor. I've got my name. I've got my manor name, North Nataliath Manor, kind of like that. And then I've got my castle. I've got my peasants. I've got where they live. I put a church right in the middle. My mill. I've got, this is my river, okay? Got some wells. I've got my manor. So you're going to be inserting pictures of what you want these to look like. To make like squiggly lines, you just go to this image, which is your line, and you select scribble. And then, of course, you'll be able to change the thickness of that line. You'll be able to change the colors. And I am excited to see what manors you can make for me. What castles are you going to live in? What are your peasants going to do? Where are you going to set up everything? So that's what I want you to do. This is the feudal system. This is how the majority of people lived. You're either living in a nice big house because you are a lord or a vassal. You could be the king living in a really big castle. But the majority of people were peasants. They worked the land. They lived on the land. They died on the land. There was no freedom. They weren't slaves, but this was their life. And you can understand then why we're in a decline of culture, because they're not learning how to read and write. There's no schooling. You read with Charlemagne that even he was not taught how to read and write. He valued education. He knew education was key. He tried to spread that importance, but that was a rarity. Your monks were the ones who were able to read and write. And because of them, we do have documents and records, but everybody else was just living to live. They were living on the land of their Lord. They were working day in and day out for their Lord. And that was life. So there wasn't a lot of innovation going on, advancement going on, technology being thought of. This was their life. So I wanted you to take some time and work this out and give me a nice little slide of your manor. So this is today, which would be Wednesday, and it's going to be doing Thursday. And let's see, Friday you have off and Monday you have off. So you're set up for a, kind of relaxing few days here. So let the creativity juices flow through you. Remember to read those pages, please. And I will see you next week.